Have you ever been so tangled up in the energy of something that it seems like this big ball of knots? The universe isn't just out there, it's interacting with you. Claim your power by embracing the unknown. This is Tracy with Tracy Talks, and I'm here to ignite your curiosity. Don't just listen, embrace it. Have you ever had a situation where you and another person didn't quite see eye to eye on something? And after this situation, you really spend time reflecting on what happened, how did the conversation go in that direction, and why did I say the things that I said? Why did I respond in the ways that I responded? I am someone who thinks self-reflection is a wonderful tool, but in some circumstances, it just creates this knot of energy. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with yarn or with thread or with any type of rope, even fishing line. And it seems like it was just this small little knot in the rope. And the more that you try to get it untangled, the more it tangled up and ends up becoming this big ball of knots. And I think this is a really great analogy for how our energy connects with people. And when you work with energy and you incorporate this belief into your life, you see how we are connected energetically. And oftentimes we think of this energetic connection as this imaginary cord, and it's just one cord that connects us. And we can have good connections in life, and we can have not so good connections in life, but that there is this tether that we have to people. And what does that look like energetically? There have been times in my life where I've been connected to people that probably were not the best connections for me. And I have done work to try to imagine that cord as this just imaginary cord that connects us. And how do I work with that and either disconnect or cut the cord or cut that tie that I have with someone? And we don't want to cut ties with everyone, that we have relationships that sometimes that energetic connection gets tangled and it becomes this big ball of knots, and we don't know what happened and how we got here, and how do we untangle the situation so that it feels like there's more ease and flow. And in those relationships that I have where so many things have happened, I reacted in a way and the other person reacted in a way. I said things, they said things. And so by the time we step back from all of those interactions, that's where we have this big, huge ball of circumstances and situations, and what do we do with that, and how do we untangle that? And I don't know if you've ever actually tried to untangle fishing line. It is difficult to do. And for some reason, that the harder that you try, sometimes the more knots that you make. And you end up having to work very slowly and very intentionally so you can release the knots, but you don't make any new knots. And I've been seeing some relationships in the same way, that how can we let all of these situations and these words that were spoken and these circumstances, how can I release this energetic bond? How can I release this tension so that this situation can relax. I mean, certainly we don't have control over anybody else. And we can't force somebody to relax and open up and allow new experiences to happen, new situations to unfold. But certainly if we look at our own energy and how we show up and how we represent ourselves energetically, maybe just small little changes in our attitude and in our actions can help to release the tension, release all of these knots. Because, again, if we go back to the actual knot, the more that we try to force something, the more that we pull, the more that we push, the more that we force this ball to untangle, oftentimes it creates more tension and more knots and hard knots, not just loose knots. The more that we pull, the harder that we pull, and we force the situation, we are actually creating these hard knots that are harder to release and overcome. And if we take that analogy and that image a little bit farther, if you have ever tried to unknot a fishing line, and you've pulled so tight and you created this knot that when you finally do get the line unknotted, you see little indentions and you see where the fishing line has a permanent crease. And that's often how our relationships can go. The more that we try to force things, the more that we want things to happen quickly and we want to force people to do things, that we create these knots in our relationships. And the more that we force, we're like pulling those indentions and creating a scar on the connection. And there are sometimes relationships we just need to cut and release ourselves from the people and the circumstances. That it's not worth the time and the effort to try to create a smooth connection. And then there are going to be times where this person is so important to me in my life. And how can we figure this out? And sometimes just letting go of expectations and allowing the situation to just release can allow the knots to fall away, to open up. And it's interesting when you have an experience in your life with a relationship. People look at that situation from the outside. And they're looking in on what has happened and who said what and who did what and can have an opinion about, well, shouldn't you do this? Shouldn't you reach out? Shouldn't you do these steps? It's always interesting when it's not actually you. And it's interesting when you haven't actually experienced all of the tension, all of the drama, all of the words that were said, all of those experiences. It's really easy to look at someone else's experience and question, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? And I'm going to go back to the image of some people have this line, this connection that is perfectly straight and it flows easily. And then there are relationships that have knots in them and have big balls of tension in the middle. And sometimes we just have to let those situations, relax and release, and let go of all of this emotional intensity. And sometimes that takes a while for both people to work through. It takes a while for people to come back around and see all of these experiences, look at them from a different way, and see life differently. And there's going to be times where people never come back around, that the relationship was too difficult. There were too many things that we need to overcome, and it doesn't seem worth it. And I guess there's a couple of points here that I want to make, that we can't actually know what two people have experienced, feel, what they've gone through, unless we've actually walked through those situations. We don't need any armchair quarterbacks in life. We don't need somebody who's not been in the middle of the situation trying to suggest, maybe if you do this, then they will do this and it will get easier. And then there's going to be times where we just have to let it go. We have to let go of the emotional intensity. We have to release that within ourselves. And there are different ways to do that. Time, distance, redirecting our focus, working on ourselves. And it's not always easy. And when we're trying to be in relationship with another person, we don't have any control over what they feel and what they want and what matters to them. It's difficult as well when you have all of these knotted experiences that are tied together, and whose is whose, and who gets to own this, and well, who gets to own this. And sometimes when we have enough distance and time, we realize that some of those moments, they don't really matter as much now. They don't seem as important. And that time and space can be a valuable tool that actually can work in our benefit and help us to clear up the connections and the relationships that we have. And how can we just let go, stop forcing what we want, and simply just allow. Thank you for listening to this episode of Tracy Talks. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and share with others who would enjoy listening to this podcast. Friends can find Tracy Talks available on iTunes, Spotify, Substack, and YouTube. Hit me up on Instagram and Facebook at More Tracy Talks. And until next time, we meet again.